I got to say, I've had an RT2600AC in my network since I bought one right after we got the review unit. It's amazing. I mean, it's great. I have noticed that if I push a lot of traffic at it, a lot of packets, I do start to see a little bit of decrease. So there's a bottleneck.
But when you say a lot, that's like way more than the average user, right?
If an average user is pushing as much traffic as I'm pushing, they're doing it deliberately.
Yeah, exactly.
Just to mess up the router. Yeah, but I mean, I did notice it, and it's like it's a higher end. You're talking about, you know, a $200 router. You kind of expect a bit more, which is why I'm so happy that I got the 2600. Now, this was the review unit sent to us by Synology. I actually bought one of these because I wanted it now. So it's replaced my 1900. I've got this. This has been purring away in my data center for about a month and a half now. And I got to say, man, it is.
Is it sweet?
It is sweet. It works just like the 1900, but I'm not seeing that slowdown when I'm pushing a lot of traffic. So obviously they've done a little bit of reworking. The processor's a tiny bit faster. It does look a lot like that 1900. I mean, the same basic shape, the same basic design. It's got 4 MIMO antennas, which it's a nice way of saying multiple in, multiple out. This is one of those devices that allows you to you know, send multiple signals and then receive multiple signals so that you can you know, increase the bandwidth.
Got a lot of vents for ventilation, so that's good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're gonna be using them. This thing does.
It's gonna get hot.
It's gonna get hot specifically because it does so much. There are so many features. Here, you want to go ahead and install the antennas?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. How about that?
Nice.
Okay. We got something for Hippo. Now, let's run down the stats on this thing because it is a pretty decent device. We're talking about a quad-core Qualcom IP. Is it a Q8065? It's a 1.7 gigahertz processor. It's faster than the 1 gigahertz Broadcom that we had in the original 1900. And of course, if you go back to the overhead or the side, this thing is kind of large. Don't expect
large
this
and in charge. I'd say like the 1900 is probably about that big.
Yeah, and a little shorter, a little lower. I've got 512 megabytes of DDR3 system memory in this thing, 4 gigabytes of flash. That's twice that of the RT2600AC. The reason why that's important is the more memory I have, the more overhead I have for running the apps, because this has a bunch of plugins that I can turn on, and I want to use them all.
That's what I was going to say about this. The thing I like the most about the Synology is that all the software that comes with it. And if you've ever kind of cheaped out on a router like I did, or used an older router, the software was the bane of my existence.
You've got the 1900HC, right?
I do have the 1900.
Isn't it nice?
Oh, it's sweet.
Yeah. So also I've got on the back, I've got all the standard ports. So I've got my Gigabit WAN port, and this does support 2 gigabit. I've also got 4 Gigabit LAN ports. However, one of these can actually be reassigned as a secondary WAN ports.
Oh, so if you had...
Yes. So if you had, say, cable and DSL, you could connect both of them, mostly for redundancy. If one goes down, it goes up on the other. But I can also, it's a form of bonding. I mean, I can't really bond unless I've got bonding on the other side as well.
Right.
But what it can do is it can look at which connection is least saturated, and the next connection that you make goes over that.
Okay.
It's actually kind of cool. I really
bonding.
like it. Yeah.
James bonding.
Also, I have the ability to, with the interface, I can set certain devices to use a particular WAN. So I can say, hey, you know what? Everyone else in my house goes over DSL. I get the fat cable pipe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, you can also do that in software too, because I've set my Xbox to be the where it gets all the bandwidth in case there's other things pulling on the network.
Well, that's QoS, and that's what this supports: quality of service. So I can use QoS rules inside of this, including like VLAN and the quality of service, in order to like segment the traffic the way that I want it.
Right.
This has also got one USB 3.0 port right over here. There we go. Yeah, right there. And it's also got a USB 2.0 port. It's got an SD card reader. So there's actually the USB 3. An SD card reader, so that I thought this was kind of silly, but I've actually used it. I put a 64 gigabyte card in my 1900, and that's all the storage I need for apps. And then, of course, you've got that 4x4 MIMO antenna. Now, that's just the hardware. The wireless specs on this are actually very, very good. This is 802.11 ABG and AC. It's got dual and simultaneous radios at 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. Your maximum on the 2.4 gigahertz is about 800 megabits per second. The maximum on the 5 gigahertz is 1.73 gigabits per second. Yeah, that's 2x2 Wave 2 if you're an AC fan. It also does beamforming, which is a nice way of saying it can use creative interference so that I can actually talk to specific devices without spamming everything else.
Right.
The OS on this, as you know, it's the same SRM that we've got on the 1900AC. If you know how to use their NAS products, you'll feel very at home because it works the same way. I love the bandwidth monitoring. I love the QoS, the quotas, the access rules, so I could set like what time certain devices are allowed to connect to the internet. So if you're a parent, this is great because I can say, hey, you know, my kids' tablets, after 10 o'clock, they don't get to access the internet. That's super easy. And we'll show that when we do the full review.
I even like that you can dial it in and change so when the LEDs come on and off.
Yeah, actually that's really important because those blue LEDs really mess up your sleep.
Yeah.
We're just figuring that out, but I mean, router manufacturers that have included that inside of this, that's forward looking.
Right.
The other thing I like, and this is the reason why I'm going with this, because if you go to the link there, Alex, this is not an inexpensive router. And this is $240.
Okay.
It's a fantastic way to spend $240. But the reason why I like it over some other routers that might cost $240 is support.
Right.
We've seen from D-Link, we've seen from Netgear, we've seen from a couple of other manufacturers that will sell, you know, pricey products.
Right.
And they haven't had their firmware updated in like 5 years.
Right. I'm trying to think of, it was that Linksys one that we had that I really liked it as a router, but they had promised that they were going to do open source software for it.
And they like,
But they waited like 2 years after it came out.
They waited a really long time. And that's where Synology uses their experience with the NAS market because they're really good about updating anytime they have an issue or anytime they want to add features.
Yeah.
SRM is the same way. I mean, I updated the 1900 maybe 5 times last year. And, you know, it's an automatic process. I don't have to flash anything. I just click upgrade and it goes.
Yeah, well, I have mine set to auto update and I have it set to times when, like, I didn't even have to tell it. I just said, just do it for times where I don't use the internet. And it was like, oh, at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're not usually on, usually. And it will do updates around that time. And it'll send me an email too, like, hey, like, I'm going to update myself in about 10 minutes, just so you know. One thing I forgot to ask, does it still have the buttons to turn on and off the Wi-Fi?
Yeah, where is that? There, right there.
Because that was something
here?
kind of new to me, that you could just be able to turn off the Wi-Fi without having just the physical button to do that.
We used to have that. Yeah. That used to be a very common feature, and it kind of went away. And I like it because sometimes I don't want to go into the setup. I just want to walk by the router and go boop.
Yeah,
and it's off.
Yeah, definitely.
And you cannot turn it back on. It doesn't matter what you do, it's off. It has been turned off. The other cool thing about this is, like you, I have it set so it will update, but I don't want it to go until I tell it to go. It will send me a text on my phone saying, hey, I just received an update.
Yeah, and can you reply through the text?
I could set it up to do that. I haven't.
Oh, okay.
I actually, I have the app on my phone, so I can just log in and go, yeah, go ahead.
Update is a go. That would be awesome.
Dinner out is a go. You don't know the movie, but.
What movie is it?
Spy Game. Robert Redford, Brad Pitt.
Oh, I should go see it. I like Robert Redford.
All right, yeah. Okay, but we understand that $240 is a lot, so we wanted to give you a budget option. This is what we went with. If you go ahead and show the link here. This is actually fantastic. This is the RT2600AC. It's a budget unit, but it's $70 versus $240. So we're talking, it's less than a third of the cost. You do take some performance hits, but I mean, it is still a very, very good device. We're talking about a quad-core Qualcom. It's a 717 megahertz, so it's not nearly as fast as the one in the Synology.
Yeah.
But also, you're not going to be doing nearly as much. In the Synology, I expect to be loading this up with apps.
Right.
With the Asus, this budget one, I'm basically only using it as a router.
Okay. Which probably for general people it would be fine because you like to play with these.
I like to play. But it's got 128 megabytes of memory. It's got 128 megabytes of flash storage. It's got a Gigabit WAN port, 4 Gigabit LAN ports. It's got USB 3.0. So a lot of the same expansions without all of the bells and whistles. On the wireless side, it's also pretty capable. About half the speed of what you would get from the Synology. It does do dual band, so both 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz. It can do both at the same time. It does 2x2 MIMO instead of 4x4 MIMO, which means that on a 2.4 gigahertz network, you're going to get about 400 megabits per second max, which is half the Synology. And on a 5 gigahertz, you're going to get 867 megabits per second, which again is about half.
Okay.
So yeah, slower, but I
Still
mean
pretty
a
good.
third the price.
Yeah, and I think, so I realized Gregory, my little brother, is using a router that I bought when I was in my second apartment or something like that. So it's like 8 years old. And yeah, I think I might, his birthday is this month. So maybe I'll pick that one up and give it to him. No? Don't do that.
I think you should buy the Synology.
Yeah,
and then
give him my old 1900. I could.
That's a lot of money, though.
I know.
I understand.
I really like my 1900.
Yeah. The other thing that I like about this, the Asus, is it just like the big boy. You can use it in bridge mode or in repeater mode.
Oh.
So I mean, if you're one of these people that likes to set up a wired network from a wireless network, that actually works really well. So you've got two choices. You've got the $240 Synology 2600, and you've got this the H13 from Asus.
Right.
Opposite ends of the spectrum as far as price is concerned. I will say, if you're thinking about a cheaper model, like some budget special from Best Buy, TP-Link is good, D-Link is good, Netgear is kind of good, but I would never buy those.
I don't know, just like all the headaches I've had from buying a cheapy router, like it's just worth it to me not to. But
when I know a company is going to keep updating their software, like I know with Synology, it means that 1900 may have cost me $200 last year. This one may have cost me $200 and some this year. But I'm going to use these things for the next 10 years.
Yeah, definitely. And I was just wanting to look it up. It looks like the Synology RT2600, which is the one that I have, is 150 now.
Yeah, so it's gone down.